10:05, welcome back to the Chad Hasty Show, News Talk 95.1 FM and 790 AM KFYO. Coming up in this hour, we've got a few more coronavirus stories to get to. Also, the RNC, the Republican National Convention, kicks off tonight. We'll get into who some of the speakers are, some of the names I think they left off. And will it be any more compelling than what the Democrats did last week? That's going to be one of the things that everybody's watching for. Is there anything compelling, or is this just a bunch of fireside chats that'll be happening? We'll get into all of that throughout the rest of this program. And we'll probably stay away from secret recordings. We'll probably stay away from secret recordings. We'll see, though. Joining us on the phones right now, Scott Braddock, a great friend of the show, editor of quorumreport.com. Scott, good morning. How are you doing today?
Morning, Chad. I'm doing well. I'm watching the beginning here of the RNC, which is sort of getting going in Charlotte. As you know, it's sort of a hybrid situation where they have some things that are live, some things that will be taped, some virtual, and there's some things that are happening, and you saw over the weekend a gathering of delegates, a small gathering there. I think it's about 300 people who were there to make some of the sort of pregame decisions, if you will. I think only 9 or 10 people from Texas were there for that. One of my friends who's a delegate from Houston, on the day that they were getting ready to, put in their request for a hotel room in Jacksonville, when that was part of the plan,
right.
Part of it was going to happen there. They were about to book their room, and that's when they said they're not going to do it. So it's been, up and down as far as what's exactly going to happen here. And I think you hit the nail on the head when you said, is this going to be, something that really contains some compelling moments or not? I mean, one of the dangers of having what is a smooth convention, and we saw this with the Texas Democratic Party earlier this year, and we talked about here on the show, of course, on KFYO, is it went smoothly, but it was utterly forgettable. None of us can remember anything that happened at the TDP this year, although they did raise about $2 million. They were bragging about that. At the Republican Party of Texas convention, it was the opposite. If you remember anything about it, it was that it was a meltdown, or really a technical disaster, which culminated in the election of a chairman who's been attacking the Republican governor nonstop since he was elected. So lots going on, and we may see some similar kind of meltdown at the RNC. And here's why. It's the Democrats basically have been getting ready for what they did last week for months and months. I mean, they were on track to do that. That was always going to be the plan during a pandemic. But the Republicans, just like the Republicans in Texas, they went back and forth about how they wanted to do this, right? And so the same level of planning, I think, has not gone into what you're going to see unfold from the RNC, as you saw from the DNC. So we'll see something very different. Whether it's good or bad, that'll be for all of us to figure out.
Yeah, I don't see any musical acts, which, good. Okay, we don't need musical acts at a virtual convention. You don't need that to happen. The one thing that I am sort of happy to see, just on the list of speakers as it is right now, is that you do have some of the up and coming people who are going to be speaking throughout the convention. Which it's interesting. The Republicans, the Democrats, they went back to the John Kerrys, the Clintons. Brought some of the older folks back. And some of the, if you want to say either more progressive or the newer base of the party, they kind of kept them at 1 minute or less, or at a montage. And the Republicans, at least it seems like they're going to focus some more on some of the younger or future voices, but it's the voices that are still all in on Trump.
All in on Trump, and one of the decisions that was made over the weekend that was a little controversial this morning is that they decided to, because of the way the convention is structured, and because they said they didn't want a small little group of delegates, that 300 that I mentioned, making all the decisions about what the values of the Republican Party ought to be, was just to forego crafting a new party platform moving forward. And that's a big difference. It's usually that the Republicans like to fight with each other about what's in their platform. We always see that at the RPT, at the Republican Party of Texas. And as you know, with the state party, because of the technical meltdowns at that convention, they still haven't done it. They say that they're going to do a platform at some point. It's sort of in a second convention that's still not been quite completely worked out how that's supposed to work, but the new chairman going to work on that. It's just a hugely different way to do all this. But I will say, Chad, that I think, whether it's the Democratic National Convention last week or the RNC this week, these conventions are turning into what they were always destined to be at some point, right? That it's a 5-day commercial for the Republican Party or the Democratic Party. They don't really do the same level of business that they used to do at these conventions. I mean, this is where they used to nominate the person for president, would really fight it out at the convention for who would be the nominee. And last week, of course, at the DNC, you saw those progressive voices who were still supporting Bernie Sanders for president. He was, entered as a potential candidate for president, and of course, Biden was nominated. The difference in the Democratic Party right now is that those that are, in the sort of the left wing, or the further left, some would say the radical left wing in the party, they're still closing ranks behind Joe Biden.
Yeah.
At AOC, Bernie Sanders, where that was not the case 4 years ago with Hillary Clinton, where they were just very angry about the way the whole nomination process had played out. President Trump to, I think, smartly sort of get in and sort of meddle in Democratic politics. The president kept saying that Bernie got screwed on this whole deal, and that it was rigged against him. Which further fomented the anger and the division within the Democratic Party. It doesn't look like they're going to be open to the same kind of strategy this time around, Chad. It seems like the AOC, Bernie Sanders, all saying, look, we are still far left liberal in our politics. It's not exactly the way they would say it, but you get it. They still want their progressive values to at some point become reality and policy. But in the meantime, it's more important to beat Trump and elect Joe Biden, which is not what you would hear from some Tea Party Republicans, for example, who might be upset about whoever their nominee is, and we've seen that over the years.
Yeah. Let's see. We've got Representative Dan Crenshaw of Texas, who will be speaking during the convention.
Oh, yeah.
And that's about it as far as Texans go as of right now. Is that about right?
Representative Crenshaw and Abby Johnson, who's a longtime pro-life advocate. You probably had her here on the show at some point.
Yeah.
She's somebody who, I believe she started out Planned Parenthood and then, had one of those, come to Jesus sort of moments. She decided she didn't want to do that anymore and became sort of a pro-life champion. But yeah, that's it. And I think, as you said earlier in the show, they'll probably add more names as we go to the speakers list. The Lieutenant Governor, Dan Patrick, who is the chairman for the campaign of the Trump campaign here in Texas, had said that he thought that the fact that there aren't many Texans at all really at the RNC means that the Trump campaign is pretty confident that they're going to win in Texas. They don't really need to focus on Texas. I think this specific focus on whether there are Texans speaking either at the RNC or DNC, and of course we're talking about it for a reason because we want to know what role our state's going to play. But it may be overhyped a little bit, Chad, because I think when you're, as far as whether these campaigns take Texas seriously as a battleground, the reason I say that is you don't have to have Texans on stage to be delivering a message that resonates with Texans, right?
Yeah.
Same thing at the DNC last week. They were talking about health care, protecting pre-existing conditions, or talking about immigration, et cetera, some of the things that would resonate with those folks who might vote for Democrats in Texas, whether there's Texans on stage or not. And I think the same thing is true for Republicans, whether it's Dan Crenshaw, whether it's Abby Johnson, or whether it's any of the other people like Don Jr. or other people who are either related to President Trump in one way or another, or people who are working on his campaign who are on stage, they're going to be saying things that appeal to Texas Republicans, Texas conservatives. The real question for both of these, conventions is whether they're saying anything that appeals to people who aren't already in the camp of Biden or Trump.
Yeah.
And I think that the Democrats did a pretty decent job of reaching toward the center last week, and that goes right to what we were talking about with AOC and Bernie kind of being sidelined. Will the Republicans do something similar? Not sure.
Let's take a look at a special election. It seems like we've had a lot of these this year. A special election. Let's talk about what's going on there.
special election Senate District 30, which runs from DFW, mainly anchored in Denton County. It goes from DFW over to Wichita Falls and Munster and down to what I call north central Texas, which is sort of like Stephenville, Gatesville, that area. Another one of these giant Senate districts. Suddenly there's an opening. As your listeners know, Pat Fallon, the current state senator, is moving on to Congress come January. He let Governor Abbott know over the weekend that his resignation is going to be effective in January 4th, I believe. And so the governor has gone ahead and scheduled a special election for just about a month away, end of September, which means that means a few things. One, I think that one of the candidates who's in this, Representative Drew Springer, who I believe is featured on KFYO.com on the homepage right now,
yep.
He probably has a leg up on some of the other candidates. He's been running for this for about a year, Chad. You remember all of this starts a cascading situation. The dominoes started falling when John Ratcliffe, congressman from east of Dallas, was first nominated for Director of National Intelligence, and you might remember that nomination sort of fell apart, and then he got a second chance at that, and now he is Director of National Intelligence. So his congressional seat opened up. The state senator, Pat Fallon, a conservative, moved quickly to become the congressman for that area, which, by the way, doesn't overlap with his Senate district at all, but it didn't matter because you had Senator Ted Cruz and other conservatives rush in, and Pat Fallon, a very skilled campaigner, went in and won in one of these meetings where it's precinct chairs who decide who the nominee is going to be. And to your point, we've seen a lot of those lately in Texas because of some of these openings. So Drew Springer, representative from Munster, has been campaigning for about a year, going all over this district, putting thousands of miles on his truck, I imagine, going to every little Republican event that he can. I'm sure some of that has been slowed down by the pandemic, but he's got some competition now, as you saw over the weekend, and as we had written about a full week before at quorumreport.com. Shelley Luther, the hairstylist from DFW, she is getting into this race. She said at an event in Denton over the weekend, the sort of the providence of God, that she had a situation where government, was coming down on her like a ton of bricks, basically, and now the Senate district where she lives has come open, so she's jumping into the race. I'm trying to figure out if it's possible for her to just move that $500,000 that was given to her by people through the GoFundMe account while all that controversy was going on. Pretty sure she can just spend that on the Senate race if she wants to. It's just personal funds now. Drew Springer, by the way, has about $250,000 in the bank, something like that. And then we also understand, and we reported yesterday at quorumreport.com, that Chris Watts, who's the mayor of Denton, is going to get into the race as well, somebody who's well known as a Republican leader and a businessman in Denton. I would imagine this goes to a runoff with those three candidates in there, each bringing their own kind of heft. You probably saw where Springer, I think he's now announced at least 30 of his House colleagues have endorsed him for Senate. He's got some other conservative leaders who are supporting him. Interesting will be to see what kind of support Luther gets because, as you know, and we covered here on the show, she quickly became sort of a conservative rock star. But that whole deal with her, quote-unquote, defying Governor Abbott during the shutdown, it wasn't just conservatives who were supporting her on that. I would say that conservatives were driving it for sure. But, you saw some more liberal folks as well saying it's not right that somebody's business has to be shut down. And I think the sort of capricious nature of the way that the governor has decided which businesses can be open and which ones cannot has broader appeal than just with Republicans.
And listen, and I got into it on Twitter with a few folks over the weekend who were, trying to, blame her for the coronavirus exploding in Texas. And it's like, listen, either the governor's shouldering all of this or not. He is the man who makes the decision on all this stuff. But to me, I think it's kind of cool that you've got somebody who a year ago probably would never have thought about running for office. They were impacted directly by decisions made by the government. And instead of just complaining on Twitter all day, they're jumping into it. Whether that's, not saying that she needs to be the favorite to win or not. I think that, Representative Springer would make a great addition. I think he's done a great job. and I think he probably has a leg up there in the race. But someone's getting involved, and I think that's always a good thing.
Yeah, and let's not forget the way that she became well-known was by defying the most popular Republican office holder in Texas. And this is going to be a Republican race. It's a special election, but it almost sort of operates like a Republican primary. All the three candidates I named and that we're talking about, they're all Republicans. It will be sort of a test as far as whether an anti-Abbott Republican is the one who comes out on top here or can at least be competitive, as we've seen from the grassroots lately. They're just not happy with Abbott, and that's how you go from having, I think, 66, 67% approval, pre-pandemic, to having 38% approval for your pandemic response as governor.
If you are, and we just have a couple of minutes left here, Scott, does a lieutenant governor come out and endorse people in these type of races? I know the governor has from time to time, but has the lieutenant governor come out, and whose endorsement, let's say you're running in this race, whose endorsement right now do you want? Do you want Dan Patrick's endorsement, or do you want Abbott's?
Well, and that's an interesting question. With Abbott, in the past, it's been a mixed record for when the governor has endorsed in Republican primaries. I would say right now, just because of this specific moment, and we're not sure, how long this is going to last, how durable this is, but for the governor right now, he may be an albatross for a candidate. He may just stay out of it because of the numbers that we mentioned. People just do not approve of the way he's handling the thing that's right in front of them every day. With Lieutenant Governor Patrick, it puts him in an interesting position. He'd rather be allied with Governor Abbott as much as he can, I think. And so, to come out for somebody like a Shelley Luther, for example, or a Drew Springer, putting his thumb on the scales in a special Senate election, might not be what the lieutenant governor wants to do, because it's also a gamble. Whenever that senator then comes into the Senate, if he was against that person, believe me, they're going to remember that.
Yeah, absolutely. Scott, tell folks what they can find at Quorum Report.
We'll keep track of all of it for you, including what happens at the RNC, and we're going to get into the campaign finances, what's going on in that special election. It's all at quorumreport.com. You can sign up for a subscription there. Just click subscriptions on the homepage. We'd love to have you. Thanks, Chad.
All right, thank you. That's Scott Braddock, editor of quorumreport.com.